Hi guys, well, it's not every day that I see this much gold in one place, and especially like quote-unquote raw gold, I guess you'd say. So I thought it was pretty interesting, and of course just decided to snap some pictures of it. It was really great timing for me too, because I did a fair amount of research about the gold rush, the one in America, um, for my book, even though it's a weapons book, but that came up quite a bit, especially for one chapter, so this is pretty neat. Now, these samples were from all over. They weren't just from America, but you saw places like Arizona, uh, Australia, so different states within the US and then abroad as well. But I'll give a real simple, high-level overview of the American gold rush. Look at that specimen, by the way. Isn't that amazing? Here's a close-up. So it was January 24th, 1848. It was a really famous incident because James W. Marshall was at a place called Sutter's Mill and found gold, and that was really the first step, the first domino in the gold rush. He and his partner tried to keep it a secret. They failed miserably, and all of a sudden the news was out locally, then nationally, and the population just absolutely exploded. I like how some of the different specimens here have, completely different textures too. That's really neat. This one's a lot smoother than the first one that I did a close-up on. I definitely recommend you just read up a little bit on the gold rush. It was one of the crazier scenes in American history, really. And there were a lot of different quirks to it. One of it is that, at least within the United States, people on the East Coast heard about it before people who were geographically closer, because the established media outlets were actually in the East. So they got a head start and made the long, arduous journey before people in, say, what we'd call now the Midwest, that kind of thing. I really like this one here. It has kind of a melted look to it. A little side note, I often jog right by a creek. It's a fork of the Trinity River, where settlers would cross the water on their way to California, in fact. And that's also why we have a street here called California Crossing. So the history of the gold rush runs right through my neighborhood. So just some more pieces and angles and colors and textures. Speaking of colors, in researching the gold rush for my book, I actually ended up finding an instance from Australia itself, and they had their own version of it in the frontier and finding gold, where they called it the red stuff, and I do not understand why, but I thought that was interesting. Isn't that piece really amazing? Here's a close-up of it. I just love how the gold is just clinging to that crystal. Going back to my neighborhood, a lot of the people, the settlers passing through there, might have been spurred on by this quotation from President James K. Polk. "The accounts of abundance of gold are of such an extraordinary character as would scarcely command belief, were they not corroborated by the authentic reports of officers in the public service." And so it's pretty cool to just see gold, like I said, in its, I guess, natural state, or, what it would have looked like when actually found, instead of after being worked by the hands of man. I've heard different versions of how to visualize how much gold there is in the world, period, like a cube the size of a baseball diamond, or 2 Olympic swimming pools. And the bottom line being there's not much to go around, so here was a pretty cool collection of it. Thanks.